Hello. Testing, testing. All right, let's do this. All right. Frederick Drones designed transportation system for Army in the World War II, asked by the government. Cooling to preserve products and provide comfort. Okay, we know that. Um, Frederick Drones was asked by the government to design a transportation system for the Army in World War II. Refrigeration is cooling to preserve products and provide comfort. Cooling to preserve products to provide comfort. Frederick Drones asked by the government to provide a transportation system during World War II. Okay. Refrigeration is cooling to preserve products and provide comfort. So that is basically like your house, like a comfort. You don't want to have the same temperature that you have outside. And to preserve products like food, stuff like that. I think I even heard or read that steel and will like change shape too during with the temperature, something like that. By the way, all of this is not done or given by a professional, so do not take this as fact. Go ask a certified hvacr professional for any and all HVACR needs. All right. The 1900s is the beginnings of mechanical refrigeration. So natural refrigeration, in a sense, would be heat traveling by itself the way it's intended. So later on, we'll see that heat travels on. Later it says that heat travels. A later note is heat travels from a warmer substance to a cooler one. Mechanical refrigeration is when you're doing it yourself or you're forcing it to move. So before the 1900s, I read somewhere, I think, something about like there was a rock or a material that they found held the temperature really well or really long. So the pharaoh or the king had the people bring the rock in during the daytime, and it would give off, or I mean, you think it gives off cold air, but according to what we know now, the notes say the heat is traveling from a warm place to a colder place. So it's probably more like the rock would be absorbing the heat. So they would let the rock absorb or release heat at night, and then during the day it would be absorbing heat inside. So to say it in a incorrect way to try and get the message in my brain, I'll say they let the rock get cold outside during the day, during the night, and then they put it inside and it made the room cold. Now I know a little bit more, and it's more like I said before, which was it released its heat to the cold night air, and then during the day, it was a much colder temperature, and then now it was absorbing heat from the room. So, obviously, the colder atoms and molecules that are closer to the rock are going to have their temperature change. I don't know if there's a quicker rate if you're closer to the AC unit or not, but let's just say it's colder there, and then it's not as cold the next foot, 2 foot, 3 foot, 4 foot, but it's absorbing heat throughout the room, and however many BTUs, let's say whatever it is, it's bringing those BTUs down. So the air in the room with the rock drops down from, I don't know the region where it was, but let's just say 90 degrees, and starts to go down to 89, 88, 87, 86, because heat is naturally travels from a warm place to a cold place. So it's traveling from the inside air, which is hot, to the colder, much colder rock. Okay. So that is natural refrigeration, I guess, still. I'm not sure if natural refrigeration is like you're not even touching it at all, but mechanical refrigeration for sure is when you're actually moving the heat from where you don't want it to a place where somewhere else. Okay, the temperature ranges for refrigeration, we have high, medium, and low. High is gonna, it sounds weird because high air conditioning range, but that's just, the baseline is gonna be like comfort, like your house, I guess. Houses. I wonder how cold it is in stores, because sometimes it's cold in there. So I wonder if they're doing the same temperature that a house would. But our high temperature range is going to be for comfort, and it's going to range from 38 degrees to 42 degrees. And I'm not sure if the optimal or the average or the middle, I'm not sure what's the correct word, but we have 40 degrees highlighted or circled there. Then we have the medium temperature, and this one's going to be for fresh food. So it helps to think of a store would have all three. Again, I don't know if they're much colder temperature as far as like for the humans that are walking around, because definitely feels like it's colder in the store walking around than walking around in your house if you have the AC unit on. But let's just say it does have all three for now to get the notes in my head. So it has high temperature range for comfort for walking around, and it has walking around in a temperature that is cooler or colder than the outside. Then the medium temperature range it has as well, where it's the fresh food preservation. So I'm not 100% sure which one this is, if it's for like those, I mean they're big, but they're much smaller than like the aisles, they have like, I don't know, 20, 30 refrigerators attached to each other as a whole aisle. So I'm not sure, when I say little, I mean, it's still big, but those little AC units that have like strawberries or grapes in them. I'm assuming those are medium temperature. Or it could even be what they're talking about is more like milk. Either way, I'm getting the idea. So that range is going to be 15 degrees to 20 degrees. And again, I don't know if the optimal or the preferred or the average or the middle of that. I'm not sure what the word is, but I have circled there 18 degrees. The low temperature range is frozen food preservation, so I'm pretty sure that's going to be the freezer sections. Well, and I guess a normal house would actually have all three if you have walking around, and then you have your freezer, and then you have your refrigerator if your refrigerator is medium temp. Interesting. So that low temperature range is negative 20 degrees to negative 10 degrees. And again, I'm not sure what the wording is, but I have circled there negative 15 degrees. That could either be optimal, the middle, the average. I'm not sure what. Okay. Refrigeration is, again, process of transferring heat from a place where it matters to a place where it doesn't matter, or at least it makes little to no difference. So you want to remove the heat from inside your house to the outside. And then I guess little or no difference would be like, I mean, you're moving it outside, so there's so much outside that your small amount of heat is not gonna like do anything to, as far as changing the temperature outside. Then we have, again, heat naturally travels from a warm substance to a cooler one. Okay. They have a note saying if you ever, like when you get your cup and you have ice in there, the soda is heating up the ice, not the ice is heating up or cooling down the soda. I think that was the note, but it's just a cool note to have a break in the study session. That's just a reference to heat naturally flows from a warmer substance to a cooler substance. So the soda is going to be the warmer substance. Ice is going to be the colder one. So the heat is flowing from the soda to the ice. Same thing like in a house that has the temperature is higher outside. The temperature outside is going to be flowing to the higher temperature outside is going to be flowing to the lower temperature inside. Again, same thing except in the winter time. When you have a higher temp inside your house, it's going to be flowing to the cooler temperature outside. Okay, good. Very quickly, government asked Frederick Jones to design a transportation system for the Army in World War II. Refrigeration is cooling to preserve products and provide comfort. The 1900s was the beginning of mechanical refrigeration. And then we have three ranges that we're going to be using. High temperature, sounds weird, but high temperature is just the comfort part for like walking around. That's 38 degrees to 42 degrees, and I gotta find out the wording, but we have circled 40 degrees. And then we have medium temp, that's fresh food, so probably not just the grapes and the strawberries in the store. It's probably more like the milk in a refrigerator or the milks at the store. That is 15 to 20 degrees, and again, gotta find out the wording, but I have circled 18 degrees. And then low range is gonna be for frozen food. That should be -20 to -10, and I have circled -15. Yes, okay, good. Okay, refrigeration is moving heat from where it is objectionable to where it matters, to a place where it doesn't, to a place where it makes little to no difference. Heat naturally flows from a warmer substance to a colder one. It helps to stick it in my brain, and it like a little break from studying. If I almost remember what they were saying. If you get a cup, soda, and ice, and you assume it's the ice that is making the soda cold, but no, it's the other way around. It's the soda is warming up the ice. So again, heat naturally flows from a warmer substance to a cooler one. So in the wintertime, the higher heat in your home is going to flow to the cooler temperature outside. And in the summer, the higher temperature outside is going to flow to the cooler temperature inside your house. Okay, nice. Very good. Okay, let's just put a little. No, that's good. That's good. That's good. That's good. Let's do at least one picture here. Okay, so this will be on watchdolearn. All right, let's see. I'm gonna try and use the Apex background for now. If it's too much, then I'll just do a blank background. Okay. So we got our house. Actually, this was doing well the other day. Okay, we have our warmer substance flowing to our cooler substance. So we can do that anywhere. This is a natural thing that happens. So we're just gonna box up the colder substance. So now we have a house around the cooler substance. And we're just gonna draw heat waves flowing to the cooler substance. So that's outside flowing in. And then simply do this again, but we just reverse it during the winter time. We have naturally heat flowing from our warmer substance to our cooler one. Just gonna box up the heat this time for the house. Then again, we're gonna draw our heat lines to the cooler substance, and now we can see that it's the heat inside the house that is flowing to the cooler substance outside. This would be for the winter time. Okay. Actually, I like this. It's a good picture here. let me, okay, do this real fast. Let's see. All right. We have our heat flowing from we have our dots showing heat and cooler. Red dot, blue dot. During the summertime, heat always flows from a warmer substance to a cooler substance. So during the summertime, we can box up the house. We can box up the cooler substance, the blue dot, for our house. And then we just show that the heat flows naturally from a warmer substance to a cooler one. And now we can see that it's outside heat, the higher outside heat flows towards the inside cooler heat inside the house. During the winter time, it's going to be the same, it's still the same law where heat travels from a warmer substance to a cooler one. But now we have the colder substance is going to be outside. So we'll box up, we'll box up the higher temperature. The red dot, that'll be the house, and then again we'll show the higher temp. The red dot is going to flow to the cooler substance, and that's the outside. Okay, next. Okay, so they gotta find a way to get some measurements and some way to categorize the AC units. So this is how they rate them. We got the first note being it takes 144 BTUs to melt 1 pound of ice. Okay, it takes 144 BTUs to melt 1 pound of ice. 144 BTUs to melt 1 pound of ice. Sorry, I'm at gotta write this down a couple times. Multiple times. Let's see. I wonder if I remember that or not. Okay, it takes 144 BTUs to melt 1 pound of ice. It takes 144 BTUs to melt 1 pound of ice. It takes 144 BTUs to melt 1 pound of ice. It takes 144 BTUs to melt 1 pound of ice. To melt 1 pound of ice. The ice being at 32 degrees Fahrenheit. It takes, let me write this, look at the picture going. takes 144 BTUs to melt 1 pound of ice. It takes 144 BTUs to melt 1 pound of ice. It takes 144 BTUs to melt 1 pound of ice. How many BTUs? 144. How many pounds? 1 pound. What are we talking about? Ice, but at ice at 32 degrees Fahrenheit. Okay. It takes 144 BTUs to melt 1 pound of ice at 32 degrees Fahrenheit. All right. Now, I know that 2,000 pounds is 1 ton. Okay, so I'm gonna write that down. 2,000 pounds, 1 ton. 2,000 pounds, 1 ton. Oh, that looks weird. Almost always write it like that, no comma. 2,000 pounds is 1 ton. Alrighty, nice. 2,000 pounds is 1 ton. Okay. 2,000 pounds of ice, 1 ton, will require 288,000 BTUs to melt. £2,000, 1 ton will require 288,000 pounds to melt. Okay. If the melting of 1 ton of ice takes place in 1 day, 24 hours, 12,000 BTUs must be absorbed by the ice every hour. Okay, so instead of having to try to memorize that, because that would be horrible if I got it wrong. If I go into the field, that was like, there are times where I would prefer to be able to get to my fact, get to my answer, get to my way of figuring that out. I would prefer to be able to be in control of it instead of being subject to trying to have to memorize something. So let's try and get there math-wise as opposed to memorizing the fact. Obviously, I mean, 288,000 is like in my head now, but still I want to make sure I can control how to get there. Okay, so we have 144 BTUs is melts 1 pound of ice at 32 degrees Fahrenheit. So let's figure out how much BTUs it takes to melt 1 ton of ice. But more importantly, let's find out how to get there. I'm trying to erase 288,000 from my brain. If not, it's not a big deal. Okay. Alright, so I want to melt 1 ton of ice with BTUs. How many BTUs would that be? 2,000 pounds is 1 ton. Pounds is 1 ton. Okay. Well, now I see why they did it like this. 144. Okay, that's 1 ton. No, 144 melts 1 pound. One pound of ice. And I'm gonna leave out 32 degrees for now. I'll just write it in there. Try not to pay attention to that. I'll try not to pay attention to that. Died out too many numbers. Okay. What am what am I doing that it goes straight into accepting that that's what I wanted to write? Okay. 144 BTUs to melt 1 pound of ice. 1 pound ice. 32F. Okay. So just shrink it, please. There we go. And we'll change that color. Let's go black. Can I do black? That is kind of okay. Okay, let's go there. All right. So I want to find out how many BTUs it takes to melt 1 ton. So all I gotta do is, it sucks because I'm remembering the other session where I'm multiplying 2,000 by something, by 1 pound, but I want to do that on my own again. So how do I, okay. What I want to figure out is how many BTUs. Let's go, Rod. BTUs. Okay. In 1 hour. Oh, nope. 1 day. 24 hours. Okay. If it takes 2,000, no, 1 ton in 1 day. Okay, so what we're gonna do is, that's 2,000 pounds. Write down first. Okay. 1 pound of ice at 30 degrees Fahrenheit, 144 BTUs. So we're not gonna multiply 2,000 by 1. We're gonna multiply 144 by 2,000. And then obviously get our calculator. One day is 1 ton. That's 2,000 pounds. It takes 144 BTUs to melt 1 pound of ice. So we're not multiplying 2,000 by 1. We're going to do it by 144 because we want to find out how many BTUs to melt 2,000 pounds of ice. And there's the 288. Nice. Okay. Okay, so this is a little hard to remember. So the following notes are, so they divide that 288 go orange, fill in orange. Okay. 288 by 24 hours. And then they end up with 12,000. So they have 288,000 BTUs it takes to melt 1 ton of ice. Then they're gonna, so 1 day is 24 hours, and for whatever reason they want to get to how many BTUs in 1 hour. So instead of going by the day, which is 24 hours, they're going to go by 1 hour, which is 1 hour. Alright, so to get how many BTUs in 1 hour, they're going to have to divide by 24. And then that's how we get the 12,000 BTUs. Okay, next note is just further showings of like dividing it down to the minute. So I guess if you divide 12,000 BTUs by 60 minutes, and then you end up with like 200 BTUs. Okay, I guess the more I learn this, the more important it is to learn the things that is hard to pick up first. So now learning the minutes is important because the before it, the hour, the day of BTUs was learned or more learned. So I'm not gonna emphasize that too much. The 200 BTUs per minute. So for whatever reason, the way they're gonna try and rate it, they're gonna try and start with how many tons of ice in a day. So to start off with, we'll go with one. They go off, or my notes have 1 ton of ice, and if it takes 144 BTUs to melt one pound of ice, but the ice is at 32 degrees Fahrenheit, just I'm gonna end up multiplying 144 BTUs by 2,000 pounds, end up with 288,000 pounds. Okay. I don't know why, but it helps the stuff stick if I'm saying we instead of I. So I'm just gonna do that. Okay. Alright, so to get, it's hard to explain, but this is the way they're doing it. It's hard to grasp. You'll see why. So they're gonna go with how many tons of ice you can melt in a day. Okay, so it takes 144 BTUs to melt 1 pound of ice, but the ice is at 32 degrees Fahrenheit. Okay, so we're gonna multiply. What we need is how many BTUs in a day that AC unit can handle or reduce or whatever. So if it takes one, we're gonna see that with 1 ton of ice. How many BTUs and 1 ton of ice in 1 day? 1 ton of ice in 1 day, that's 2,000 pounds in 1 day. And what we need to see is how many BTUs. So if it takes 144 BTUs to melt 1 pound of ice, we're gonna multiply 2,000 pounds because we know how much it takes to melt one pound of ice. 1 pound of ice is 144. We need to find out 2,000 pounds. So we multiply 2,000 by one pound, and we're gonna get the 288. Okay, let me say that again. So the way they do it is a little complicated. They're gonna go by hours, and then like ton of ice, and then ton of ice in a day, and then they're gonna say how much ice in an hour. So that helps me to remember it. That helps the information get in because I already know it's going to be complicated, and it helps to get a sticking point. Okay, so they're looking at how many tons of ice in a day. So we're gonna go. So they're starting with 1 ton of ice. The note starts with 1 ton of ice. 144 BTUs to melt 1 pound of ice. 1 ton of ice in a day is how much we need to know how fast it takes to melt it, or yes, how fast it takes to melt it. So 1 ton of ice in a day, that's gonna be 2,000 pounds in a day. If it takes 144 BTUs to melt 1 pound of ice, what we need to do is multiply 2,000 pounds by 144. That's how we'll get the 288,000 BTUs. So 288,000 BTUs is what it takes to melt 2,000 pounds of ice. 288,000 BTUs is what it takes to melt 1 ton of ice in 1 day. So in 1 day, there are 24 hours. So the next note shows 12,000, the hour mark, the hour, how many BTUs in an hour is important to know. So how do we get there? There's 24 hours in a day. We just figured out that, we just read that it takes 288,000 BTUs to melt 2,000 pounds, 1 ton of ice in a day. So we have the info, we just got to, and then if you know math, now you have both things that you need to figure out the answer of how many BTUs in 1 hour. So 24 hours in a day, we have our info, now we're just going to do our math. Divide 288,000 by 24 hours, and we'll get this note for 12,000 BTUs per hour in 1 hour. And if you wanted to, we could divide that down by the minute, and we just divide by 60, I believe. And you'll get your 200, let's see if that's true. 12,000 divided by 60? Yeah. Divide that by 12,000 by 60, and you'll get 200 if you want to find out how many BTUs to the minute. Okay, so this is how, when they rate it as 1 ton, 2 ton, 3. Okay, so they're going to rate their AC units. This is so the consumer can buy it, and so the manufacturers can kind of like, they have somewhere to start, so they can just make the units, as opposed to like, instead of having like 20 variations of I guess if you know cars, this car has this engine, this car has this engine, this car has this engine, this car has this engine. Car A has a 1.5 engine. Car B has that's actually a great idea. Car B has a 1.6. Car C has a 2.0. And then car D has a 3.5. Now, imagine there's like much more in between. 1.7, 1.8, 2.0, 2.1, 2.2, 2.3, and so on, so on, so on. So instead of just having like those four categories looks nice when you talking about millions of vehicles. So instead of it looking like this to the consumer, because like there's only so much you can expect them to do. So much to know. So in order to, I guess, maybe to protect them as well from shady manufacturers or shady whoever, instead of it looking like this, like imagine trying to buy a unit for your house, and you're buying the unit for the house because it's getting hot, and if you don't have the money, or you have the money but you don't want to pull the trigger and buy it, then it's probably because you don't have a lot of money. And the reason why you're going to use your not a lot of money is because it's getting freaking hot and you have a family. So instead of it looking like this, and just to make it easier for the manufacturers to like not have to make so many variations, you could have it nice and neat like this. Car A is the 1.5 engine. Car B is the 1.6 engine. Car C is the 2 engine, 2.0. And car D is the 3.5. Nice and neat, easy to shop, much easier to shop. Or you could even say, now you can shop because you're not dealing with the stress. Well, not as much stress. So for us, we're going to go by the ton. By the ton. And how we're going to write that, or how they're going to go by that, is 1 ton one and a half ton, one ton, 1.5 ton. Oops, where are we? Oh, there we go. 1 ton, 1.5 ton, 2 ton, 2.5 ton, 3 ton, and we're going to have the 4 ton, so it's going to go by 1 ton, 1.5 ton, get your 2 ton, then you're going to get your 2.5 ton, and then you're going to get your 3 ton, and your 3.5, 4.5 ton, 4.5 ton, and then we're going to end with, I believe, it could be higher, but my notes go up to 5 tons. Okay. So to back up a little bit, it takes 144 BTUs to melt 1 pound of ice, and it's the way they rate their equipment. It's kind of difficult to explain or understand? What they're going to go with is tons of ice in a day, then an hour, and okay, so we have 2,000 pounds is 1 ton. What they want to know is how many tons of ice in a day. But they also want to know how many let's say how many tons of ice in an hour. So what they're looking for is how many BTUs in a day, which goes along with the note of how many tons of ice in a day. Now we go down by the hour, and we're going to be saying the phrase of how many BTUs in an hour. It's the same thing almost as how many tons of ice in an hour. So it's not going to be melting or absorbing. It's not going to be dealing with the heat, it's not going to be dealing with the ton of ice in an hour, because we just established that it's going to be melting. The wording is going to be off, but it's just to get the info in my brain. So how much it takes to melt. The wording is, I believe it's absorb. How many BTUs must be absorbed by the ice every hour? So that's the wording, but I'm going to use different wording and correct wording to just get it in my head. So how many tons of ice in a day? Then they're going to go down to the hour. How many tons of ice in an hour? But really, it's only going to be a percentage of that ton, because we just said how many tons of ice in a day. So if we divide that ton of ice, those BTUs of ice in a day by 24, we'll find out how many tons of ice can be melted, how much tons of ice can be melted in an hour. But really, what we're saying is how many BTUs can be absorbed in an hour. So we got that 1 ton of ice is 280,000 pounds. Sorry, BTUs. And that was by taking 2,000 pounds, which is 1 ton, multiplying by 144. Because it takes 144 BTUs to melt 1 pound of ice. So we multiplied 2,000 by 144, and we got the 288,000 pounds. Then we also wanted to find out the hour mark, because that's part of the rating, or at least the info that you might see on the box, or that you need to know. So we just divide it by that to find out what it is in an hour. If you know this is the day, there's 24 hours in a day. So divide this by 24, and that's how we ended up with our 12,000 number. So the 12,000 number is going to be 12,000 BTUs, and it's going to be per hour, because that's the number that we want to know. How many BTUs per day and how many BTUs per hour. So per day, per hour. Per day and per hour. Okay. So we have 1 ton is going to equal 12,000. And you can just, like, math-wise, just go from there. 2 tons 288,000 BTUs in a day, 12,000 BTUs in an hour. To find, this is for 1 ton, just to find out the next BTUs for a 1.5 ton, or the 2 ton, or the 2.5 tons, we just gonna go straight forward and use math. So 12,000 is your number. All you're gonna do is multiply that by whatever you need. So 12,000 BTUs is 1 hour, and this is 12,000 BTUs is 1 ton in 1 hour. All we're gonna do is multiply it by 2. So we want to know how many BTUs for 2 hours. I apologize. How many BTUs for a 2 ton? All we're going to do is multiply by 2. We'll end up with 2 tons, and then we're going to end up with our 24,000 BTUs. If you want to know for a 3 ton, all we gotta do is, again, just use math and go straight forward. If you want to know 3 tons, we're going to multiply 12,000 by 3, and we're going to get 36,000 BTUs. So if you want to know 1.5 tons, we're going to just multiply, I believe that's 1.5, right? 1.5? Yeah, 1.5. So whatever tonnage you need to know, you just multiply by 12,000. So for 1 ton, we don't need to multiply because that's what you know what it is. If you wanted to, you could multiply by 1. For 2 tons, we'll just multiply the 12,000 by 2, and we'll get our 24. To know the 3 ton, we'll multiply by 3, and we'll get our 36,000 BTUs. I also have a note here for 400 square feet equals 1 ton. And that's near and around the 4 ton, 4.5, or 5 tons. So it could be that traditionally places that require 4 ton, 4.5 ton, 5 tons, they're traditionally 400 square feet. Or what the note is saying is 400 square feet is for 1 ton. Not sure. Okay, that's pretty cool. Nice. Okay, here. All right. The last page that we had already studied, and then we'll get into the next notes. Okay. So temperature and pressure, there is a relationship there. Temperature goes up, the pressure goes up. Pressure goes up, the temperature goes up. That's a good one. Excuse me. Okay, so temperature and pressure, they have a relationship. If the temperature goes up, the pressure goes up. If the temperature goes down, the pressure goes down. Likewise, if the pressure goes up, then the temperature will go up. If the pressure goes down, the temperature will go down. So temperature and pressure have a relationship. Okay. If the temperature goes up, the pressure goes up. Or if you increase the pressure yourself, or if there's a kink in the line, or whatever the case is, if it goes the other way around first, where the pressure goes up, then the temperature will go up. Okay. Okay, so another baseline we have is water boils at 212 degrees Fahrenheit at atmospheric pressure, and that is 29.92 inches mercury. I think that's how you say it, inches mercury or inches per mercury, which is also 14.69 psia. Okay. All right. So water boils at 250 degrees Fahrenheit if the pressure goes up. Before we have 212 degrees Fahrenheit where water boils. Again, it's going to be at atmospheric pressure. No. 212 degrees Fahrenheit at atmospheric pressure. But now we have water boiling at 250. Now it's because our pressure went up to 15 psig. So I'm guessing the 15 psig is higher than 14.69 psia. I believe psia is per square inch atmosphere, so it's the atmosphere pressure, and then psig is per square inch gauge. So I'm guessing the 15 pressure in your gauge is going to be higher than the 14.69 pressure in the atmosphere. Okay. The word is not correct, but I just using the wording to get it. The wording I use is to get it in my head. Okay. So again, we have this time the pressure going down to 0.248 inches mercury. Whereas before we had 29 inches mercury, we're going down to 0.248 inches mercury. We'll just do the first couple numbers, 248. So we reduced the pressure to 248 inches mercury from 29. And now we have a boiling temperature for the water at 40. So there's a relationship. There's a guess a relationship is a good word to use. The temperature goes up. Temperature goes up. The pressure goes up. If it's the other way that starts first, if the pressure, if there's a kink in the line, if there is debris in the line, maybe I'm not sure if debris in the line can cause the pressure to go up, but again, it's just wording so I can memorize it. If it's the other way, where there's a kink in the line, debris in the line, or whatever, if the pressure goes up first, then the temperature will go along with it and it will go up as well. Same thing. If the temperature goes down, then the pressure will go down. And again, same thing. There's a temperature-pressure relationship. So even if it's the other way around that gets started first, if the pressure goes down, then the temperature will go down as well. Alright, so the reason why I forgot what is said in the book where what happened with water or who tried to use water first as the substance to use in a unit in an AC unit, but the note I have now is refrigerants are substances that boil at low pressures and temperatures and condense at high pressures and temperatures. So refrigerants, I don't know if they were made or discovered, but they happen. Like, so how is a human going to control his environment? Now, I don't want to be I don't want to I don't want to be an ass and give like all this information about bettering yourself and stuff like that. But for the sake of me studying, and if you find the information helpful, good for you. That's great. That would be cool. But I'm not trying to be an ass. So I listened to a book on YouTube. Basically, it's another guy who got the information from. I forgot who was the guy that started changing the way of your thinking. It was the guy Earl Nightingale's mentor who started it first. Okay, so this basically, well, we don't know for sure, but let's just say this guy is one of the many who got the information from that guy and transferred it in his own words, or he got it from somebody who learned it from the main guy, or somebody who learned it from one of the disciples, whatever. But yeah, if you have positive thoughts, you can attract positivity. Same thing, negative thoughts, you attract negativity. So aside from stuff like that, how can a man change his environment or nature? Aside from your thinking, what he can use is laws. So we have this temperature pressure law, and how does he control that? He can't just go up and tell temperature to go down like a thermostat. Like thermostat wise, he can't just. But I guess what he can do is make a thermostat first and then put the pressure to go down and then temperature will follow, or the other way around, increase or decrease the temperature to get the pressure to go down. So now we kind of have a way, but how do we do it? Excuse me. So later on, I'll go over the compressor, and it literally compresses and creates pressure difference. But for here, to try and get to the idea of refrigerants are substances that are optimal for refrigeration, it's because they boil at a certain temperature, they boil at a certain pressure. Sorry, the note I have here is they boil at a low pressure, at a certain pressure, and they condense at a high pressure slash temperature. So again, the wording is going to be wrong, but I mean, it's going to be wrong or it might be wrong, but it's just the way to get it in. I also could have copied it wrong. Okay, so it might be low pressure and low temperature, but I just have low pressures and then I actually wrote out fully high pressure slash temperature, so know that it could be wrong. Okay, so the reason why we use refrigerants is because they're optimal. Now, if you use water, it's going to boil and condense at temperatures that are not like helpful. So how a man can control his environment is by using the laws in nature. So if we create a system where we can increase the pressure, the temperature will go up or down. If we can increase the temperature, the pressure will go up or down. So what man did was create a box, air conditioning unit that will take heat from a place where it matters from a place where it matters to a place where it doesn't. And in order to do this, we're going to have something called a refrigerant. We're going to have piping, and we're going to have something inside of it. So molecules, the faster they go, the hotter they're going to be, and or the hotter heat that's going to come from them. So heat cannot be created nor destroyed. It can only be transferred. So we're going to use that law as well. So with the other law where heat travels from a warmer substance to a cooler one, we're going to use this temperature and pressure relationship and have the molecules in our refrigerants travel from a place where it matters to a place where it doesn't. As it's traveling from a place where it matters to a place where it doesn't matter, it's going to pick up heat and release heat. The way we're going to have it move around in here is by increasing the pressure at some point somewhere. I'll go over that. But we're going to increase our pressure or reduce our pressure in order to move our refrigerant around. As we move our refrigerant around, the temperature and the pressure is going to go up or it's going to go down. But the point is, when it gets to the place where it is needed, it is going to pick up heat. Once it picks up heat, then we move it, and then when it gets to somewhere else, natural law of heat flows from a warmer space to a cooler space is going to happen. So at around this point where it absorbed a lot of heat and there's pressure going on, it can be as high as like, it can be very hot. It'll be hotter than the outside pressure temperature. So if the day is like 95 degrees Fahrenheit, this refrigerant can be like 125. So at this point, we'll be able to use the law of heat flows from a warmer space to a cooler space. So we'll be able to dismiss this heat. Reason being is when it gets back to starting again, we need it to be colder than 80 degrees, 85. So we have to increase I'm not sure how it works exactly, but it's kind of, I'm getting there. This is how I can understand it. This is how I can be able to open my mind to allow the information in, is by saying like wrong stuff or not really accurate. I mean, it isn't accurate if it's not really accurate. So if we're gonna sell something, it has to be reusable. And if man's gonna sell something, it's gonna be like cheaply maintained. So you cannot have it like a huge price tag to keep it running. So that means we're going to have reusable stuff. So we're going to reuse this refrigerant. It's not going to be a one-time use. We're going to be reusing it. I'm not sure what the actual number is if you want to get down to the nitty-gritty of how many times the refrigerant is being used. But we're going to be reusing it. So the 1 second, the 1 hour, the half hour, whatever amount of heat we absorb and we released out into the air, because now our temperature is 125. We brought it down. We needed to increase the pressure because that is linked to the temperature. Outside is 95 degrees Fahrenheit. So we need to release our heat. We need to make it like 125 degrees Fahrenheit. So the way we were able to make a thermostat for nature is just by using the laws, and so then we just increase the pressure. We created a system where we can manipulate the pressure, then we just increase the pressure. So you increase it with our compressor over here. So we increase the pressure, and then that is linked to the temperature. So now we're at 125 degrees Fahrenheit of refrigerant, and the outside temp is 95. So we can, in a way, dismiss or reject heat, and then now our refrigerant will drop down from 125 to something lower. Then it'll pass something else and we'll reduce it more, I believe, or something like that. But the point is, it'll get reduced just by releasing heat. Now now the refrigerant can be used again to go into the house, absorb heat, and then it'll just keep cycling back and back. The reason why we use refrigerant is because it's going to change state. So boil and condense at the temperatures that we need, that is optimal. Okay. So going along with the change of state idea, saturation temperature is the point at which, if you add or remove heat, your thing will change state. So if we add any refrigerant will change state. So I think if you see ice on your freezer or refrigerator in a place where it's not supposed to happen, then there's something wrong with your unit. Or the wording could be it's not as optimal. It's not running at optimal. Or it at least isn't running at the optimal temperature design that the engineer had in mind. Now, it might still make your stuff cold, but that could be putting more wear and tear on a different part of your system. On let's say part 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 B over here. This part over here. If it has more wear and tear because the system isn't running at optimal, then part B is going to wear and tear, and they're going to have to buy a new one. And the engineer he's not just considering optimal that your house is getting cold. He has to keep in mind of all the parts in it. So I'm not sure what is the correct wording. It'll still cold. Your stuff will still get cold, but there's something wrong with your system. I'll say that. Just because one of your parts might be getting wear and tear, or yeah. So we need a change of state to be happening at the correct places. The correct places. So we need a change of state happening in the evaporator and at the condenser. If you see ice in a place where it's not supposed to be, that means there's a change of state occurring. Yes, if you see ice at the wrong place, that means a change of state occurred. But we don't want it to happen there. Okay. The change of state, I believe, is just the water or the air around the piping. So the refrigerant boiling at the wrong place, the refrigerant being so cold at the wrong place is going to be at the, let's say, colding temperature for the water, and it'll be so cold that the temperature will drop in the air around the pipe, and it'll actually change it to ice. So if you see icing in the wrong place, yes. If you see icing in the wrong place, yes, that means that the air around your pipe went, it got cold enough for it to drop temperature, which when at a certain temperature, your water will turn into ice. But that's not necessarily what you care about. What you care about is what caused that to happen. So your refrigerant is cold enough to make that happen, but the point is your refrigerant is too cold at the wrong spot. So your refrigerant is broken, or your AC unit is broken. And again, we need this to be cheaply maintained, so we need to keep the cost down. So when we say broken, when I say broken, I mean like you could be causing more stress on a different part of the system, which means replacing this part. So that's what I mean. broken because the engineer did not design it to be that cold at that spot for a certain reason, and it's probably to deal with money and wear and tear on on certain parts of the system. They need certain stress. If you add more stress, you're gonna have to replace that part, which was what they may not have designed it for. When these two changes of state occur, they're going to remain at a constant temperature. So at the evaporator, a change of state will occur. Excuse me. And at the condenser, a change of state will occur. When a change of state occurs, the temperature remains constant. Okay. So the way humans label their things that they find is they usually just label it or name it what it is, or as quick or as simply to what it is. So in the evaporator, a change of state occurs. The refrigerant is going to evaporate. So they called it evaporator. What happens, I believe, is the refrigerant goes from a liquid state to a vapor. So it's not like it evaporates and it exits the system. It just goes from a liquid state to a vapor state. What it does is when it does that, or at least because it's at a certain pressure or it's at a certain temperature, again, we use that law of temperature and pressure relationship. If the temperature goes up, the pressure goes up. So if our refrigerant changes state to a vapor, that means it got hot enough. We can control it getting hot enough by squeezing it, in a sense, which means what I'm trying to say is if we reduce the amount of space in there, what I'm trying to get at is if we increase the pressure of the refrigerant, the temperature will go up. If it goes up high enough, it'll vaporize. So now, not just we increase the pressure we just wanted the temperature to be hot enough so that way it can, here's my note that it says evaporator absorbs heat from area to be cooled. Evaporator absorbs heat from area to be cooled. Evaporator absorbs heat from area to be cooled. Okay. Okay. Evaporator absorbs heat from area to be cooled. Okay. The compressor creates the pressure difference needed to facilitate. So I gotta look at the evaporator again, how that works. Absorbs heat from area to be cooled. Condenser rejects system heat. So what I was saying is probably more to do with, what I was talking about is probably more to do with the condenser. And remember, the reason why we're using refrigerants is because they do what we want. And the reason why we don't use water is because we need changes of state to occur. That's going to happen at two places. For whatever reason we need that, let's just go with the result is going to be it's going to make this space hot. It's going to make this space cold. By changing state, it's going to make this place hot, this place, and this place cold. That's just a way to get it in my brain. Okay. The reason why we use refrigerants, what we think of normally is when it gets when it gets high enough temperature, it boils, and when it gets cold enough temperature, it turns into ice. What we're thinking about is water normally, but that's not what we're using. What we need is something that will boil at a certain temperature and freeze or condense at a certain temperature, and refrigerants do that because they boil at low temperatures. And they condense at high temperatures. So they do the opposite of water. Okay, that's why I'm getting like mixed up. Okay, so what I was talking about is I was talking about vaporizing and then absorbing heat. Vaporizing enough so that way it can interact with the outside air, and then it can be hotter than the outside air, and then it releases it into the outside air with the natural law. So that's where I'm getting mixed up, because the other way around is for refrigerants. So instead of controlling it by increasing the pressure, and vaporizing it, what we're gonna do is I'm gonna have to see how we do it, but what we're talking about is a condenser, not the evaporator. We're gonna condense the refrigerant, which will then make it boil. Now that it is at a higher temperature than the outside air, we use that law of heat travels from a warmer substance to a cooler one. So now we can reject heat. But all we're doing is just having our refrigerant be at a high enough temperature, and then letting nature take its course, and then the warmer substance, the warmer heat will the heat from the warmer substance will flow to the cooler one. But the wording we have here is rejects heat, or at least how we perceive it in the way it helps us, in the way in what we're using. It's not just a natural law happening. We're getting rid of heat. Okay. So refrigerants boil at low pressures, and I'm going to say temperatures. And whoa. Refrigerants boil at low pressures and temperatures, and condense at high pressures / temperatures. Hold on. Boil at low pressures and temperatures, and condense at high pressures / temperatures. Yeah, see, that doesn't make sense, because normally you think about water, and it's the other way around. So boil, now I gotta put this in my brain. Boil at low temperatures. So how does that look like? Okay, we got our stove here. Got our stove. Let's get our pot going. Here's our pot. Okay. Refrigerants boil at low pressure and condense at high pressure. Okay, what is that? All right, so they boil at low pressure. All right, I'm gonna do my dots here for water turning into vapor. Okay. Then I'm gonna make my notes of pressure, reduced. So refrigerants boil at low pressure. Refrigerants condense at high pressure. Okay, this is helping. So condense at high pressure slash temperature. I'm gonna draw the same thing. Stove, pot. Now this time, I'm gonna draw an ice. Or I'm gonna do this because I need a solid picture. Okay, I got my ice here. Now, if you have a high pressure, your refrigerant, whoops, what do I need here? If you have a high pressure, your refrigerant will condense. So refrigerants boil at low pressures, and refrigerants condense at high pressure. Refrigerants boil at low pressure and temperatures. Refrigerants boil at high pressure and temperatures. Let's just repeat this with the pressure. Then we'll say it again with the pressure and temperature. Because again, the law is that there's a relationship there. If one goes up, the other one goes up. We use refrigerants because they're optimal for what we want. You don't use water because it doesn't work out. Because let's just say during the change of state happens, it creates a hot consequence or a cold consequence, and then we just blow that into the room. But that change of state in water that makes that cold or hot consequence doesn't happen at the correct temperature that we need. For whatever reason, maybe it's too expensive to have it that way. It's not as cheap to maintain. For whatever reason, we use refrigerants. Maybe that's not the case. Maybe it's just the pressure, the temperature isn't there for us to use a natural law of it needing to be hotter or colder than the outside air to make that temperature swap. To make the warmer refrigerant go to the outside air, or the warmer air to go to the refrigerant, the cooler refrigerant. Whatever the case is, we use refrigerants because that works optimal. Whether it's because it's money-wise or however way. We have refrigerants boiling at low pressures and refrigerants condensing at high pressures. So we have refrigerants boiling at low pressure, and we have refrigerants condensing at high pressure. Okay. That is where we're going to be using mostly for our condenser and compressor. Sorry, evaporator. We'll just say those two for now, but it's used pretty much in all the 4 devices, it looks like. Excuse me. So the evaporator absorbs heat from the area. The evaporator absorbs heat from the area. Okay, I think this is correct. I'm not sure. Evaporator absorbs heat from the area to be cooled. The condenser rejects heat, system heat. Yeah, see, this is odd. I'm thinking of water, but it's not, but we're not using water. That's why it's messing me up. The evaporator vaporizes the refrigerant, turns it into vapor, and it's going to do the opposite of water, I believe. It's going to cool down the area around it. I'm going to say cold or cool. The evaporator absorbs heat from the area to be cooled. The opposite of what I normally think of, because I'm thinking of water. The condenser, this is ice for me to not have so much intensity in the wrong area. This is ice. The condenser rejects system heat. So the temperature is going to be hot. It's going to be high. The temperature is going to be high in the condenser. This is where we will be rejecting system heat. In our little loop, where we have multiple parts. In our little loop, at some point, we're going to be picking up heat and rejecting heat. Picking up heat and rejecting it. The reason why we have a loop and the reason why it's reusable is because money-wise, how are you going to sell something to someone if they have to pay, essentially if they have to use that thing thousands of times? They're not going to buy that thing if they have to buy it 1,000 times. So we're going to be reusing this thing that will be making your house colder. So the way we do this to control nature is by using temperature and pressure relationship, and that heat heat cannot be created nor destroyed. It can only be transferred. So no, energy cannot be created nor destroyed. And energy, I guess, is linked to how much it motivates the molecules to move faster or slower, and then that creates heat. I hope I'm getting this right. So in our little loop, we're going to be needing to send our refrigerant this way, and this way. It's going to interact with the air around it, and then it's going to do its natural law. So it's going to pick up heat. Then we got to move it around to a point where it can interact with the air around it again. And then this time it'll just do its thing. But this time it'll be hotter than the air around it, and it'll, the word for us is reject heat. Okay. So there's a temperature pressure relationship law, and a way for us to have a thermostat with nature is to control one of the things in that if you use laws and that and use one of the things in the law. So we're going to use pressure. So what we have to do first is create a system. Now we can increase the pressure, and then by being able to control the pressure, we can manipulate the temperature. Alright. The reason why we need the compressor is because that's the thing that's going to control the pressure. That's the thing that's going to move the refrigerant through the system. If the pressure is the same throughout the whole system, then the refrigerant won't move around. That's why we need it to be different pressures at different points, so that way it will flow throughout the system. Okay. The metering device, another part of the system, is also something that regulates the refrigerant. So at a certain point, we're going to have a metering device. The way it regulates refrigerant is it'll increase the okay, here we go again. I believe so that it's the additional thinking of ice versus refrigerant. I mean, water versus refrigerant. So this is where I'm getting mixed up. So the metering device will literally be a shorter tube. You have a big tube, and then you have a shorter tube. It's meant to increase the pressure because we want a change of state happening. Now, I'm going to have to learn some more about it, but let's just say when the change of state happens, I'm going to use something like the Big Bang. A consequence happens, literally just because of the change of state occurs. That could be wrong, but I need to get it in my head, so that's how I'm going to do it. And then I'll update as I go. So let's say two Big Bangs happen in this part and that part. This part A is going to be, whatever, say condenser, evaporator. With that change of state happening, it's either going to be a coldest with that Big Bang happening here or there. You're going to have a consequence. So you're either going to have consequence of hot or heat happening, or consequence of cold happening. increasing the pressure. That will, I believe it changes the refrigerant from 100% refrigerant to 25% refrigerant. Sorry, liquid. From 100% liquid state to a 25% liquid, 75% liquid and 25% vapor. Okay. Alright. We just got, technically not that much, but if I explain everything, it could be a lot. Okay, so we have the metering device again. So it's literally a thinner tube, and that's meant to regulate the refrigerant. What we want to do is go from 100% liquid to a 75% liquid and a 25% vapor. The note I have is controls the flow of subcooled liquid from condenser to evaporator. Creates a pressure drop between high and low pressure sides of the system. So again, the reason why we have the compressor is to create a pressure difference. We want the refrigerant to be moving around so that way we can reuse it, because there's no way, let's say you have a napkin that can wipe the air, and the air in your house will get cold, so you throw your napkin away. There's no way a consumer is going to buy thousands of napkins to do that. So this device that we use needs to be reusable and low cost. So we come up with designing a piece of equipment that has a reusable napkin. That reusable napkin is a refrigerant. It just uses the laws of nature. It'll have the refrigerant going from here to there. When it gets here, it may be at a low temperature, which will cause high or heat to travel from the warmer temperature in your house to it. Next, it'll use the other law of the atoms or the molecules. The faster they move, the warmer they are. All we gotta do now is use a fan. So the air around this pipe, or let's not get too deep into it, but the air around this consequence, all we got is going to be warmer now or colder now. So all we gotta do is just use a fan. So instead of it taking however many minutes for the cold air around the pipe to travel 1 inch, 2 inch, 3 inch, 4 inch, 10 feet, 5 feet to your face, all we gotta do instead is just add a fan. So now we have this refrigerant using this natural laws of changing the temperature. Then we just gotta use a fan to blow it into the room. Then we'll use our reusable napkin and move it somewhere else, so we can turn it in a way where it can be reusable. Because as it is right now, it's getting hotter by the second because it's absorbing heat in the room. So we got to increase the pressure or decrease the pressure or whatever it is, so that way it gets to a point. So that way it uses the law again of heat travels from a warmer substance to a cooler one. So now, in order to remove the heat from our napkin, it needs to be hotter than something. So the only thing we have access to, or at least the only thing that could be cheap to use, would be the outside air. So if the outside air is 95 degrees Fahrenheit, we need to change our refrigerant to something higher than 95 degrees Fahrenheit. And we just use that law of heat travels from a warmer substance to a cooler one. Now, we use other laws to cool the room down, and now our atoms, molecules, refrigerant they're moving quicker. So now they're already hot just from absorbing heat in the room. So if we increase the pressure a little bit more, we can get it to for this example, 125 degrees Fahrenheit. Use that law and reject. The wording is reject, but we're using that law. And then now our napkin is going to go from 125 unusable refrigerant, to a colder temperature. Now it's reusable because now we can use it again. We can send it into the room again, and then wipe away the heat, and then we'll just keep doing it. Make it reusable, make it recyclable, then send it out again. So the metering device is a thinner tube that will literally help make a change of state, but not completely. We only want the refrigerant to go from 100% liquid to a 75% liquid. And again, the wording is incorrect, but this is what I'm using to get it in my brain. Let's say a hot consequence happens in this unit or this part, and then a cold consequence happens in this part, and then okay. All right. So about 25% of the liquid leaving the metering device immediately vaporizes, and it's going to turn into what's called flash gas. Excuse me. So what I'm thinking of is like the change of state when it happens, kind of like a big bang, a cold or hot consequence happens. That's where I'm at right now. And then as I learn more, it'll change and get more accurate. All right, so there are 3 commonly used metering devices: capillary tube, I think, automatic, and expansion valve, or capillary tube and automatic. Okay. I also heard about the TXV valve in class. Okay, I'm not sure how important it is to know the metering devices right now, but let's see if we can find it quickly. If not, I'll just move on to the condenser. They're probably just like how they're designed or how they're made, but they should be doing the same thing of changing the refrigerant from a 100% liquid state to a 75% liquid state. Again, I'm not sure what the engineer exactly needed. Maybe he needed that, or he just needed the 25% flash gas consequence. But We'll be updating my understanding of that as I go. Where are you, metering device? I can't find the exact note, but we'll just leave it at that. 3 common metering devices: either capillary tube, automatic, and expansion valve, or capillary, then tube, or capillary tube, automatic, and expansion valve. Either way, there's 3 commonly used metering devices. Okay, so condenser. Again, it's one of those parts where we need a change of state occurring. So we have rejects sensible and latent heat from the system that was absorbed by the compressor and evaporator. Located on the high pressure side of the system, the refrigerant condenses from a high temperature vapor to a high temperature liquid. Alright, so now we're getting more complicated. So we have got to change the way of thinking from water. The refrigerant condenses from a high temperature vapor to a high temperature liquid. Okay. Condensing temperature is determined by the side pressure in the system. Refrigerant is subcooled at the outlet of the condenser. Subcooling. The cooling of liquid refrigerant below its saturation temperature. Standard air-cooled systems are designed to operate with a minimum of 10 degrees Fahrenheit of subcooling. Okay. High efficiency condensers operate with more subcooling than standard efficiency systems. Alright, where I'm going to go with is, for now, the condenser rejects sensible and latent heat from the system. Okay, so I'm going to add from the system, meaning the compressor and the evaporator. I was just thinking of the room, but now I'm going to try to add to my thinking of it's rejecting the heat absorbed from the system. It's going to reject the heat absorbed from the compressor and the evaporator. The condenser rejects sensible and latent heat from the system that was absorbed by the compressor and the evaporator. The condenser rejects sensible and latent heat that was absorbed by the compressor and the evaporator. The condenser rejects sensible and latent heat that was absorbed by the compressor and the evaporator. the compressor, no, the condenser is gonna reject heat, absorbed by the system, absorbed from the system that was absorbed. Give me a second. Let me write this down. Let me paint write it down on the picture. Rejects heat from the system that was absorbed by the compressor and evaporator. By compressor and evaporator. Okay. Okay. I'm going to try and, instead of writing it down multiple times, I'm going to try to say it multiple times. Okay, so the condenser rejects sensible and latent heat from the system absorbed by the compressor and evaporator. Rejects sensible and latent heat from the system that was absorbed by the compressor and the evaporator. Okay, good. I'm going to just repeat this multiple times without looking. The condenser absorbs the compressor. So I was getting confused with the system absorbing the heat from the room, and I was going to add to it from the compressor and the evaporator. But when I wrote it down, I wasn't correct. So I had, there's a difference. System, and then the next was the compressor and evaporator. So it was, rejects the heat from the system by way of the parts. So the condenser rejects sensible and latent heat from the system by the compressor and the evaporator. Rejects sensible and latent heat from the system that was absorbed by the compressor and evaporator. So I forgot absorbed. So, okay. The condenser rejects the condenser rejects sensible and latent heat from the system that was absorbed by the compressor and the evaporator. Rejects sensible and latent heat from the system that was absorbed by the compressor and the evaporator. Yeah, that's good. The condenser rejects sensible and latent heat from the system that was absorbed by the compressor and the evaporator. The condenser rejects sensible and latent heat that was absorbed by the No. I need to pay attention to focus here. Okay. No autopiloting this, just like you can't autopilot Apex. Like, these maps are designed, like, you need to know how to play BR to enough of a degree. You can't just autopilot them. So annoying, people try to autopilot them. So let's focus and not autopilot this. The condenser rejects sensible and latent heat from the system that was absorbed by the compressor and the evaporator. Okay. I think we got a hold on that one. The next note was, okay, it's located on the high pressure side of the system. You can kind of remember that because, okay, so I've been studying this for a while, so I have a little bit more to grasp on. So I know that the condenser is the part, I'm going to say piece, the piece of the unit that is outside the house that you normally see. Okay. Let's say to learn, what's another phrase for argument's sake? What's a word for like studying to get it in my head? What's a quick phrase for that? Studyingly speaking, let's say there's two pieces in the AC equipment. The piece you see outside and the piece you don't see. So the piece you don't see is in the attic or basement or whatever. But if you, in the YouTube videos, I've seen them in the attic or a closet. But I'm gonna go with the guy that his video is coming to mind, and I've seen it. I saw him go into the attic. Okay. He went in the attic, and I think he's old, and like I'm wondering like how, because he was sitting down, cross-legged, and I'm thinking like, aren't the joints like, doesn't it hurt to be sitting down like that at that age for that long? Or does he actually like not sit long in general because he's doing the trade HVAC? So you have that piece you don't see that is inside the house, and then you have the piece that is outside the house that you normally see. The piece you see outside is the condenser. That is going to turn your napkin into a reusable napkin. That's going to turn your refrigerant into a reusable piece, because we're going to be using laws, and we need our refrigerant to be at a lower temperature, so when it goes back into your house, it is at a lower temperature than your house, so it can then suck up, or it can allow the warmer temperature in your house to go to it. It can wipe it away like a napkin, and then it has to run back to the condenser, which is outside, the piece you don't see outside. Now it's like a not wanted napkin. Now it's a used up napkin. So now it is not usable, means it's at a higher temperature than your house, because what are you going to do with the 125 degree napkin? You cannot use it inside your house. If your house is at 8 degrees and you're going to use this 125 degree napkin, you're not going to make your house colder. You're going to make your house hotter. So refrigeration is taking heat from a place where it matters to a place where it makes little to no difference. So we're going to use this, so we're going to try and like dry out this napkin, kind of like close in clothes that dry up outside on that clothesline. We're going to use the outside air, which is 95 degrees Fahrenheit in this example, and we're going to allow the heat from our 125 degree Fahrenheit used up napkin to travel to the outside air, where it makes little to no difference. Now we have a reusable napkin. So that is what our condenser allowed us to do, is reject sensible and latent heat from the system that was absorbed by the evaporator and compressor. The point where the idea that it's at 125 degrees Fahrenheit, it's the piece that you see outside, and it's actually going to be at a higher temperature than the outside air, and it's going to heat up the outside air. Well, it's mind-boggling, and that's how we can remember that the condenser is on the high side of the system. Actually, okay, we'll leave it like that. The note is you move heat from a place where it matters to a place where it doesn't, or at least it makes little to no difference. So your AC unit's not gonna heat up the BTUs in your house is not gonna heat up the whole Earth like a lot. So that's what I mean by from a place where it is objectionable to a place where it makes little to no difference. But that's more so for me to open my mind and keep it in there. That's how I'm going to phrase it. It's mind-boggling that the refrigerator is going to get hot enough where it's hotter than the earth so that it can transfer the outside air, where it can transfer its heat to the outside. Okay. Next one is, again, well, I'll just use it was confusing and I got it wrong because I kept thinking about ice and water, and I need to change my thinking to refrigerant. And refrigerant boils at low temperature. Refrigerant condenses. Refrigerant boils at low temperature and condenses at high temperature. So water does what we think it does, and so it boils at a high pressure, at a high temperature, and it turns into ice or condenses at a low temperature. Refrigerant does the opposite. So when it boils, that is at a low temperature. When it condenses, that's at a high temperature. So the next confusing thing we're going to learn is in the condenser, the refrigerant condenses from a high temperature vapor to a high temperature liquid. What comes to mind immediately is, whether it's wrong or not, think of or pretend the evaporator comes before the condenser. So we assume that the evaporator evaporates the water, but no, it's refrigerant that we're using. So we assume that the evaporator evaporates the refrigerant. Obviously, or we're just going to say obviously, we know the refrigerant is not going to evaporate and leave the system or leave the pipes. It's going to just stay in there. What we just mean is that we just want the liquid to go into a vapor state. Okay, so we'll say, or pretend the evaporator is before the condenser. So it's going to be at a high pressure. No, we'll just say we'll say high temperature, high pressure, because they're related, right? Temperature and condensed temperature and pressure have a relationship. One goes up, the other one goes up. So we have to say, if the refrigerant is in there we go again, running into that situation. So then why is it a high temperature vapor into a high temperature liquid? The refrigerant condenses from a high temperature vapor to a high temperature liquid. Does a refrigerant boil at a low temperature? Didn't we say refrigerants are substances that boil at low pressures and condense at high pressures? So the refrigerant condenses from a high temperature vapor to a high temperature liquid. Alright, let's draw this motherfucker out. Okay, let's see. Hopefully I don't apologize every time I cuss, but I'll do it this one time. I only cuss for I don't like hearing it, but I can understand it if it's a quicker way to explain or describe the intensity of a situation, and the intensity of a situation is like 7 to 10 on that scale of 1 to 10. Like I can understand someone going that way if they don't have a lot of emotional IQ or courage or patience to explain it all without cussing, and they just go straight to cussing. I can understand it. I don't like to hear it, but I can understand it, and I can sympathize with the lack of IQ. And here I'm using it because like I'm stressed out about this new bit of information that I thought I knew, but apparently I didn't know. So I'm not saying it I'm hoping you can sympathize with me and go with it, as opposed to just think I'm just throwing it out there without being like respectful. Okay, here we go. And it's a way to cope with it, to make it easier and fun, and like it's not a big deal to again cycle back to like our reusable napkin, to make it easier to study and then study. Boom. Okay, so I'm not trying to be disrespectful, is my point. And I'm freaking out, so I'm trying to get to a calmer state, like our reusable napkin, so I can study. And it's easier to study or retain the information when you're in a better or good mood. Okay, let's see. Or when your back's against the wall, kind of like how that book was talking about, Instant Millionaire. All right. Okay, so let's write the first note down or draw it out. Refrigerants are substances that, perfect, I have it here. Refrigerants are substances that boil at, sorry, it's the vapor over here, on top of the pan, on top of the stove. Refrigerants are vapors that boil at low pressure and condense. This is ice. I'm using ice as the word or the picture for condense. Refrigerants are substances that condense at high pressure. Okay, so to make it a little bit more complicated, pressure, again, there's a relationship between, I don't like saying that, but let's say there's a temperature and pressure relationship. Okay, because they can't break up, pretty much. There's no like fucking, that kind of puts it in my head where they can possibly break up, and then like, no. It's a fact or it's a law. It's like there's no, that just adds more things that I have to like, more things to my plate that I have to absorb. So no, that's why I don't like saying it like that. There is a temperature and pressure relationship. So if, I'm going to try this out. If refrigerants are substances that boil at low pressures, then that also means that refrigerants are substances that boil at low temperatures. And refrigerants are substances that boil at high temperatures. Okay. Refrigerants are substances that boil at low pressures, and because we have that law of temperature and pressure relationship, if the pressure goes up, the temperature goes up. We have to also say refrigerants are substances that boil at low pressures and temperatures. Okay, let's start with that one. Boil, because that's what they weren't saying boil. They were using the other one. Okay. Refrigerants are substances that condense. This is condense. This is ice, condense at high pressures and high temperatures. Okay, we'll use that one. All right. Make this a little neat for us. Okay, for me and you. Okay, let's see. Our note for the condenser is the refrigerant condenses from a high temperature vapor to a high temperature liquid. High temperature vapor and high temperature liquid. So a change of state occurs, but so I'm wondering if did the temperature decrease? Let's say, because I'm assuming with the water that the vapor is at a higher temperature than the water, than the liquid. So are these like similar temperatures, or are they just saying that in the category that is the highest, which is vapor, it's at a high temperature? Then it goes into the category that is colder or cooler than it, but it's a high temperature within that category. I'm not sure, but the refrigerant condenses from a high temperature vapor to a high temperature liquid. So, condenses. Refrigerants are substances that boil at low pressures and condense at high pressures/temperatures. condense at high pressures/temperatures. The refrigerant condenses from a high temperature/vapor to a high temperature liquid. Damn, I mean, that might be, I don't want to say it, but let's just go with that. Okay, so what I gotta remember is it goes from a vapor to a liquid, and then just keep in mind that it's still gonna be high temperature, because I know that the condenser is one that rejects the heat, so it could go up to, like, for the example was 125, and the outside air is 95, which is mind-boggling. That it's gonna be hotter than the outside air to use that law. So I know it's going to be a high temperature, and temperature is related to pressure, which is another law. So I can memorize that, or I know that. I'll start with that, or I'll hang on to that, and then I'll add. It comes in at a certain state, and then it goes to a certain state, and the state that's going to be in the condenser is liquid. But it comes into it as a vapor. It's on the high side, so it's going to be a high pressure or temperature vapor, and then it'll change into a high temperature pressure liquid. It doesn't matter if I say high temperature or high pressure, because there is a law there. They're connected. One goes up, the other goes up. So I can always find the correct term that I need by saying either one. If I don't get the answer right away, they want like high pressure, and I say high temperature, I can get to the correct answer in the second attempt. Okay. What do we have so far? The condenser rejects the heat from the system absorbed by the compressor and the evaporator. It's located on the high side of the system. And did I get the first one right? Rejects sensible heat and latent heat from the system that was absorbed by the compressor and the evaporator. Okay, that's right. I got it right. The last one was, okay, high pressure side of the system, because the 125 and 95 and being mind-boggling that the system is going to be hot enough to give to the outside air. So it's going to be high regardless. Okay. I'll say that condenser is condense, which I have as ice in my head. So I'm going to say condense. In my head, it goes from ice or solid to ice to water. So I'm going to say liquid. So high liquid and high pressure. That law is the relationship of temperature goes up, pressure goes up. So it's going to be a high temperature / pressure liquid. It's going to become that, and it is going to come from a high temperature, high pressure vapor. Okay. Condensing temperature is determined by the side pressure in the system. Alright, I'm just looking to see how much. I'm being a little finicky right now with how much more I absorb on this piece, on this section of the condenser. I'm not going to go into the subcooling and high efficiency. It's just a better standard. It's just a better, from what I remember from class. not necessarily this note here, but what my teacher was saying, how he explained it. It was just high efficiency is just a better. It's just better. Better at doing its job, I guess. Or you could say it's more accurate. Like say you're gonna shoot a basketball into a rim that is the size that it's supposed to be, versus the size that it's like much smaller. So if you, I mean, whichever ways you want to go about it to memorize the stuff, you can go if you like conspiracies, or if you're, I think if you're normal, you have that idea there, or at least you have that being applicable, and then you can quickly fall down a rabbit hole of, oh, there's conspiracy this, conspiracy that. So we can use this strategy and go with the sports being more about money, or at least a lot about money, and not necessarily the sport itself. So we can go with basketball, and we'll go with, like, if people are idiots and or they want to use their entertainment time as entertainment time, not necessarily let's see who's the best in the world. And they want to see action, and they want to see this, and they want to see that, because they have it's their entertainment time. And let's say a lot of the population is doing a 9 to 5, and that's not what they actually want to be doing. And let's say a lot of people are not doing the job or the thing that they want to do. So there's not a lot of high IQ, or so that means, like, when they do their entertainment time, it's not going to be like optimal. Like, you could argue that for me playing video games, playing Apex, it's not high IQ to be doing that. At least let's just leave it like that. Okay, so I mean, there's a time and place for everything, and you need balance. Okay, so let's say you don't have the greatest thinking, and you're going to go to a basketball game. You don't necessarily, it's okay to, or it's, you could start with saying that you're not going to be wanting to see the best in the world. You just want to have some entertainment, some quick gratification. So you might want there to be a lot of points on the scoreboard versus like less points. And a high efficiency system, or a high efficiency condenser, is just one that is better at doing its job. So in this case, I guess the width of the rim, the width or the range that it's working with, instead of it being like 5 or 7, it's going to be like 3 or 4. So it's just better at doing its job, kind of like a basketball rim being the correct size for its consumers to get the most entertainment out of their entertainment time. Kind of like the UFC. You know, a lot of people don't want to see the best in the world. They just want to see people they want to see. And they're roughly probably top 10 in the world, not necessarily top 10. Okay. So I'm not going to go much more into those notes. The cooling of the liquid refrigerant below its saturation temperature. I can leave that for next time. Refrigerant subcooled at the outlet of the condenser. Something happens right at the exit of the condenser. It's not okay. That's not a big deal. I could do those two next time. And then condensing temperature is determined by the side pressure in the system. That I can just lightly touch with a way to troubleshoot. Like if your pressure You can go to it to like see the pressure. The engineer designed the pressure to be this at this point for the health of the system and for the ability of the system to reduce the heat in the house. So that's what it's designed to be. But that doesn't necessarily mean if you have earthquakes, if you have trucks, if you have whatever is going to pass by and move the system around in a way where now it damages this, damages that. So then now the only pressure that the condenser can do now is something different than what the engineer wanted it to do. And now that the condenser operates at a different pressure or creates a different pressure or a different pressure happens within it, now the refrigerator, the temperature is going to be changed. So the note I'm going to say just for now is the only thing that I'm going to grasp onto is the condensing temperature is determined by the pressure in that little part or in the system. But we have the note of determined by the side pressure. But I'm not going to hold on to that with a lot of intensity right now. We'll just go with what we have and go over those three next time. Okay, so we have the condenser rejects sensible and latent heat from the system by the compressor and the evaporator. Okay, just go over that to make sure I know it. So the condenser rejects heat from the system absorbed by the compressor and the evaporator. The condenser rejects heat, rejects sensible and latent heat. So the heat that is absorbed by those compressor and evaporator from the house that is trying to cool down. So the way we control nature is by just using laws. We don't like actually control for this instance. We'll use we're not talking positive and negative thoughts. We're talking about like controlling the temperature or a pressure. So if we want to reduce the pressure, reduce the temperature, we gotta use higher temperature, allow that natural thing to happen where the heat from the warmer substance travels to the cooler one. We use that law, and then that's kind of like wiping away like a napkin, wiping away the heat. In order to reuse it, because we need to reuse it because it has to be reusable. We cannot just expect a customer to buy 1,000 napkins that can wipe away heat. It has to be reusable. So we make it reusable by turning its 125 degree Fahrenheit self into a lower temperature. So in a way, we're absorbing and rejecting heat. In the condenser itself, it rejects heat. It's rejecting the sensible and latent heat that was absorbed from the system. That was absorbed by way of that was absorbed by the compressor and the evaporator. All right, cool. What was the next note? Let me just get the beginning of it. Okay. It's on the high pressure side of the system. So I have the 125 degree Fahrenheit example in my head. The condenser is the unit you traditionally see that is outside. It has to be at a higher temperature So we can use that law where the heat travels from our high temperature 125 degree refrigerant to the 95-degree Fahrenheit outside air. So it's on the high side of the system. Sorry, I'm trying to rush this. Okay. Okay, cool. But I get it. Okay. The last note for this section, oh yeah, the complicated one. The one with the water. Gotta change my way of thinking with, instead of water, it's refrigerant. And it was the opposite. So water boils at a high temperature. Like you turn the stove on, the water goes up, and then the water boils. This one's the opposite. You boil that sucker, and it condenses. The reason why we use refrigerants is because it's optimal for us. Or for them, the way they figured it out. If they're going to use a cheap system, it's optimal for that. And a cheap system means people cannot be buying thousands of heat wipeable napkins. It has to be reusable. So we control the nature by using these, in this field, by using these laws. And these laws involve pressure and temperature. So we're manipulating pressure to change the temperature, to absorb it to have our molecules go into the house, absorb the heat in there, or it's transferred. And then we move our molecules, our refrigerant, to the other side and reject it. So this one is the opposite. We got refrigerant boiling. No. We have refrigerant condensing at a high temperature / pressure. And we have refrigerant vaporizing at a low pressure / temperature. Refrigerant condensing at a high temperature, high pressure, and refrigerant vaporizing at a low pressure, low temperature. Refrigerant condensing. No. Let's go over the example again I drew was a stove and the traditional water and vapor and the water boiling example. That one we had the opposite. That one we had negative pressure. And I wish I didn't look at the example, but let me see. So it's this stove and the ice. I'm sorry, and the vapor, the water boiling. That's what water does. That's what I normally think of, but I gotta think of the opposite. So refrigerant does the opposite. It vaporizes just like the water, but we're not using the same idea. We're using the opposite. So we're using low temperature and pressure is connected to temperature. So we're using low pressure, low temperature, vaporizes refrigerants. So the opposite again. So we got the stove, the pan, and then ice. Water condenses at a low temperature into ice. Refrigerant does the opposite. Refrigerant condenses. That's the same part of the. In that example, they're the same, but then they switch up. Refrigerant condenses at a high pressure, high temperature. Okay. Try and take a couple seconds so I can say it again. Make sure I at least know it, at least long enough to hold on to it for 20 minutes, maybe an hour. Okay. Sky does look good today. I think I want a bunch of trees around my house. But I was watching YouTube and these guys that exterminate rats, the twins, apparently rats get on houses by way of trees. That's one way. So that's gonna blow. Okay. My brain is still holding on to the example. Alright, I'll do my best. I mean, I don't think I'll forget it before I say it, but let's proceed. Alright, so I got my example. I drew the boiling, I drew the stove and the pan and the water boiling on the left. The stove, the pan, and the ice on the right. Alright, so water traditionally in my head boils at high temperature. For this one, the refrigerants are optimal, so we're using, because they're optimal for refrigeration. So it's the same in the example, except for the P is different. So refrigerants are going to boil. I don't want to say boil, but it's the same thing, right? Because it vaporizes. So the P is different. So that's the same in the example, but the P is different. The refrigerant and the water is the same in that example as far as vaporizing is concerned, but the pressure, the P is different, and the P stands for pressure. Pressure and temperature have a relationship. So refrigerants vaporize at low temperatures and low pressures. The other part of the example with the stove, the pan, and the ice, because ice is my example for my picture to mean condense. Again, the water and the refrigerant are the same for that part of the example. The thing that is different is the pressure, and pressure is related to temperature. So water condenses, it turns into ice. That's negative temperature. Negative temperature. Temperature and pressure, there's a relationship. So low temperature equals low pressure. We're going to go with the opposite because refrigerant is optimal for refrigeration. It's the opposite of water, what I think. Water condenses at a high pressure and temperature. Alright, that's pretty good. Good. What was the first note? Okay, rejecting. The condenser rejects sensible and latent heat from the system absorbed by the compressor and the evaporator. Again, we have those laws that we're manipulating and using. We're using one piece of the law to get the other piece of the law. And then we're going to use like the natural heat going from a warmer substance to a cooler substance. The second note was, located. It's on where is it located? It's on the high side of the system. The condenser, for that example, could go up to 125 degrees Fahrenheit. And then we use the natural law where heat naturally moves from a warmer substance to a cooler substance. And it's mind-boggling that it's a higher temperature than the outside air. It's going to transfer its heat, okay? And the third note was the stove example. Refrigerants vaporize at low pressures and temperatures, and refrigerants condense at high pressures and temperatures. All right, we'll do the subcooling, the high efficiencies being better at their job, and something happens at the outlet of the condenser. We'll do that next time, or the time after that, or we'll do it next. We'll do it later. All right, now what we have left is the compressor and the evaporator. We'll do evaporator. The evaporator, heat exchange surface used to absorb heat. Okay. Located on the low pressure side of the system. Okay, that should be easy to remember. And then learn and or explain and then learn. Next is, but it's located on the low pressure side of the system between the metering device and the compressor. Absorbs heat by boiling a low temperature liquid to a low temperature vapor. Nice. Another somewhat complicated concept, idea. Okay. Refrigerant typically enters the evaporator as a liquid/vapor mix that's 75% liquid, 25% vapor. Just connect that with the idea of the metering device that I was talking about earlier. Okay. The heating of a vapor above superheat, the heating of a vapor above its saturation temperature ensures that no liquid refrigerant enters a compressor equal to the evaporator outlet temperature minus the evaporator saturation temp. Okay, so that's talking about superheat. Design superheat is typically between 8 degrees Fahrenheit and 12 degrees Fahrenheit. Superheated vapor does not follow a pressure/temperature relationship. Okay. That might be useful to understand later. Hopefully there's no superheat in the condenser, because if there is, that might be what's messing me up. If there isn't, then okay. Trying to decide if I want to cover those today. I think I'm not going to cover those today. I'm going to cover the first half and leave superheat for later. Next time, or the next following time, one of the next following times. Later. So, heat exchange surface used to absorb heat. heat exchange surface used to absorb heat. So I gotta picture a surface. How to picture a surface. Not just any surface. A surface that it absorbs heat. Okay. So we'll just do a surface. Heat exchange surface used to absorb heat. Alright, so it's gonna be a little bit of cheating involved. This isn't the first time I've gone over HVAC, like my notes for my class. So believe I saw, so it's in the piece of the evaporator, it's like it's just your piping that coils like this. Or at least that's what I think I saw. So the surface that they're talking about is literally just the surface of the pipe, or okay. So what this surface does is where, like, naturally heat travels from a warmer substance to a cooler substance. So that piping there exists. So whatever air is like literally right next to that pipe, it's going to follow the natural law of warmer heat travels from a warmer substance to a cooler one. So I mean, we can think of that piping, the surface of the piping, being a surface. And what are we doing in these pieces, in the condenser and the evaporator? We're using that natural law of heat travels from a warmer substance to a cooler one. To a cooler one. So we'll use that to get or memorize heat exchange surface. And then again, just remember that the evaporator absorbs heat. Okay? Heat exchange surface used to absorb heat. Okay, heat exchange surface. Heat exchange surface used to absorb heat. Heat exchange surface used to absorb heat. The evaporator. It's the copper piping meshed or pushed together into a coil. Natural laws happen. So literally the air right next to the piping is going to follow the natural law, which is heat travels from a warm substance to a cooler substance. So we can think of, to memorize a note, that the surface of the piping is a surface. It's a heat, the law that we're using is basically a heat exchange. Heat exchange surface. And then what the evaporator does is it absorbs heat. Heat exchange surface used to absorb heat. It's located on, it is actually opposite of the condenser. So it is, I'm gonna say, to memorize it, it's the opposite of the condenser. So opposite of high pressure side is the low pressure side, or at least high side, low side. So let's say low pressure side. So it's on the low pressure side of the system. And what was the rest of the note? So it is between the metering device and the compressor. So what I can do is we have the condenser, and then the note of, or I'm going to say, the evaporator is on the opposite side of the condenser. So we have two pieces of equipment here. And then the third piece is going to be the compressor. So we got our so we have our condenser, and then I'm going to say that the evaporator, to make it happen in my head, to memorize it, to get it there, to open it up, to open up my brain. The evaporator is the opposite of the condenser. Alright. And then the rest of the note was it's between the compressor and the metering device. I don't need to start off with the metering device. I can throw that out and just say compressor. Because I've drawn little like pictures with just the 3 important pieces, and then I upgraded to the 4 pieces. So I can get the rest of the note with it's between the condenser and then the other piece that matters for me for now and that is the compressor. So it's between the condenser and the compressor. And then actually the note says it's not talking about the condenser, it's talking about the other piece. And the other piece of the system is the metering device. So it's a heat exchange surface used to absorb heat or absorbs heat. And then it is located on the low pressure side of the system. Let's just divide this in half for here for now. This is going to be the high side, low side, and it is between the compressor, which is the other important piece, and the actual 4th piece of the system, which is the metering device. Okay. The last note was, well, let's make sure that first one was right. Heat exchange surface used, it's used to absorb heat. Heat exchange surface used to absorb heat. Heat exchange system that absorbs heat. I'm not sure if there's a difference in the wording, if it matters, but heat exchange surface that is used. It's used to absorb heat. And the final note, the other way around of the condenser. So we are absorbs heat by boiling a low temperature liquid to a low temperature vapor. Absorbs heat by boiling a low temperature liquid to a low temperature vapor. Absorbs heat by boiling a low temperature liquid to a low temperature vapor. So I have all the information in my brain. I can just piece them together. So we have that natural law. Heat flows from a warmer substance to a cooler one. Let's see what we got here. So our natural law heat flows from a warmer substance to a cooler one. Alright, that's one piece of it. We know that the evaporator absorbs heat. We know that the condenser rejects heat. We're going with the evaporator is the opposite of the condenser. The condenser rejects sensible and latent heat absorbed from the system by the compressor and the evaporator. So if the evaporator is the opposite, it absorbs as opposed to rejects. Absorbs heat. We have our example of refrigerants boiling at low pressures and low temperatures. Condensing at high pressure, high temperature. So we need this one here. The evaporator is low temperature, low vapor. The evaporator absorbs heat The evaporator changes refrigerant from a low temperature. No, it was boils, right? The evaporator boils refrigerant. The evaporator absorbs heat by boiling a low temperature liquid to a low temperature refrigerant. Absorbs heat by boiling low temperature liquid to a low temperature vapor. Absorbs heat by boiling a low temperature to a low temperature vapor. The evaporator absorbs heat by boiling a low temperature liquid to a low temperature vapor. So I got all the pieces, I just gotta put them together so I believe I know it. Alright, let's do this again. We have the pieces. Okay. One law that we're using. Heat travels from a warmer substance to a cooler one. Alright. Next, the example of the stoves. The vapor. Water, high temperature, makes your water turn into a vapor. Okay, for refrigerants, because they're optimal for this field, for the way we design the system, it's the opposite. The P is the opposite. Refrigerants boil or vaporize at low temperature, low pressure. So the condenser, the evaporator within its name is going to evaporate the refrigerant, which is for us, it means it vaporizes. Um, Vaporizing here means vaporizing here means low pressure, low temperature. So the condenser rejects heat. The condenser rejects heat. If the evaporator is the opposite, it's going to absorb heat. So we have the three pieces of information that we need. Okay, put it together. The evaporator absorbs heat by boiling a low temperature liquid to a high temperature liquid. To a low temperature refrigerant, a low temperature liquid to a high temperature, to a, to a low temperature vapor. The evaporator absorbs heat by boiling a low temperature liquid to a low temperature vapor. It absorbs heat by boiling a low temperature liquid to a low temperature vapor. All right. Evaporator absorbs heat opposite of the condenser by boiling a low pressure liquid to a low pressure vapor. Absorbs heat by boiling a low temperature liquid to a low temperature vapor. Alrighty, let's try this again. So we have everything that we need, right? To describe this evaporator. Just need to put it together. We're using one law we're using. Heat travels from a warm substance to a cooler one. Refrigerants are optimal because they boil, but it's not the same as water, it's the opposite. They boil at low. And they vaporize at low. and the P is different in this example that I have, and P means for pressure, and pressure has a relationship with temperature. So I could also say refrigerants vaporize at low temperature. Okay. All right. Okay. The condenser rejects system heat. I'm going to say the evaporator is the opposite, so I can learn this. If the evaporator is the opposite of the condenser, which absorbs heat, no. If the evaporator is the opposite because it absorbs heat, and the condenser rejects heat. Okay. Now let's put this together. The evaporator absorbs heat by boiling refrigerant, but it's boiling a low temperature liquid to a low temperature vapor. Okay. All right, that's decent. Okay. Next. All right, my last one. What time is it? Okay, last one is the compressor. Should be easy. As far as I know, it controls the pressure, which creates a pressure difference, which allows the refrigerants to move around. Let's see what else we got. Compressor pumps heat laden vapor from the evaporator to the condenser. Oh yeah. The evaporator is in between the compressor and the metering device. The compressor pumps heat laden vapor from the evaporator to the condenser by increasing refrigerant pressure. Pumps vapor from the evaporator to the condenser. Reduces pressure on the low side of the system, increases pressure on the high side of the system. Common compressor types: scroll, reciprocating, and rotary. Positive displacement compressors require that the compressed gas be moved to the condenser. Positive displacement compressors require that the compressed gas be moved to the condenser. Positive displaced compressors require that the compressed gas be moved to the condenser. So it skips the condenser. Positive displacement compressors require that the compressed gas be moved to the condenser. Positive displaced compressors require that the compressed gas be moved to the condenser. So it skips the evaporator. Liquid goes into the evaporator and it comes out a vapor. It's just a different way of compressing the refrigerant that it goes into a gas and it needs to stay a gas, so it can't enter the evaporator as a liquid, so it can't enter the evaporator, so they just move it to the condenser. Okay, well, we'll leave that note with that. Okay. Common compressor types include scroll, reciprocating, and what was the other one? Scroll, reciprocating, and rotary. Yep. Scroll, reciprocating, and rotary. Common compressor types include scroll, reciprocating, and rotary. Common compressor types include scroll, reciprocating, and rotary. Okay. I honestly don't care too much about that note or the compressor too much, aside aside from the initial thing of just it creates a pressure difference. It allows there to be a different pressure on the low side and the high side. That way the refrigerant actually can't move. Otherwise it would just sit there. Okay. So that includes 2 notes. It includes 3 notes, but we'll go over the third one. Reduces pressure on the low side of the system, increases pressure on the high side. Nice. There's 2 for that one. And okay, pumps heat-laden vapor from the evaporator to the condenser by increasing refrigerant pressure. So I kind of have that idea as far as the refrigerant pressure. So I just gotta understand it now. So it's increasing the pressure. So the low side of the system is low. The high side of the system, the high pressure side of the system is high. So I'm guessing the low pressure side is what sucks in, allows the refrigerant to be sucked from the compressor, and then the high pressure is what allows the refrigerant to be sucked from the low side or the condenser. Pumps heat-laden vapor from the evaporator. That's just a fancy way of saying, or an accurate way of saying, or explaining that the vapor from the evaporator, right? Evaporator has heat. Like you need to know that the vapor from the evaporator, the refrigerant leaving the evaporator has heat. So the heat-laden vapor from the evaporator, pumps heat-laden vapor from the evaporator to the condenser by increasing the refrigerant pressure. So I think I have all the pieces. Just gotta put it together now. So we can use our law of heat travels from a warm substance to a cooler one. Okay. The evaporator is going to have a vapor. The compressor, it goes compressor. We're going to skip the metering device for now. It goes compressor, evaporator, condenser. Okay. Compressor, evaporator, condenser. The evaporator is going to have it's the opposite. The evaporator is the opposite of the condenser. The condenser rejects sensible and latent heat. Absorbed by the system. No, rejects sensible and latent heat from the system absorbed by the evaporator and the compressor. So the evaporator is going to absorb heat by boiling low pressure, low temperature liquid to a high temperature, high pressure vapor. So we're going to have a high temperature refrigerant leaving the condenser. The evaporator. Okay. Okay. So the compressor is going to pump pumps heat-laden vapor the compressor pumps heat-laden vapor from the evaporator to the condenser. The compressor pumps heat-laden vapor from the evaporator to the condenser by increasing and reducing the pressure. Increasing the refrigerant pressure. Alright, last note here and we're done for the day. The compressor pumps heat-laden vapor from the evaporator to the condenser. The compressor pumps heat-laden vapor from the compressor to the evaporator by increasing the refrigerant pressure. So the condenser is going to reject heat. The opposite is the evaporator absorbs heat. The other example of the stove with the water boiling and the water condensing. We have refrigerants are optimal because they vaporize at low temperatures in liquids and condense at high temperature slash pressures. So the condenser rejects sensible and latent heat from the system by the compressor and the evaporator. The evaporator absorbs heat by boiling low pressure liquid to high pressure vapor from the evaporator to the condenser by increasing the pressure. Did I just mix the evaporator in there? Okay, so pumps heat-laden vapor from the evaporator to the condenser by increasing the pressure difference, by increasing the refrigerant pressure. Pumps heat-laden vapor from the evaporator to the condenser by increasing the refrigerant pressure. So to move that refrigerant pressure, it increases it at that point in the system. By increasing the pressure, you allow or you force the refrigerant to move. When it exits the evaporator, it's going to be at a high temperature vapor. Pumps heat-laden vapor from the evaporator to the condenser by increasing the refrigerant pressure. Having a difficult time here explaining a way where I can memorize that. Where I can explain it to myself to get the note as opposed to just simply memorizing the note. Compressor. Pumps heat-laden vapor from the evaporator. Alright, this is it. Compressor pumps heat-laden vapor pumps heat-laden vapor from the evaporator to the condenser by increasing the refrigerant pressure. Pumps heat-laden vapor from the evaporator to the condenser by increasing the refrigerant pressure. Pumps heat-laden vapor from the compressor, from the evaporator to the condenser by increasing the pressure, by increasing the refrigerant pressure. Alright, that's it for now. Not sure if I'm going to stream Apex or not, but that's it for now. Think about what amazing life is. Later.